Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Tonight's webinar is something I actually really enjoyed remaking from the old slides, the old template. And I found myself really with a more conceptual look at it. But I also hope to be able to define very specifically and concretely things that you can do that are your work, that can help you in this process, to support you and also to support the gains, the progress that your child makes during their treatment. So let's get right into it. What is your work? I get that asked all the time. I use that phrase and I take it for granted that people know what it is. And here's one of the quotes that I pulled out of some of the webinars to illustrate the difference between what your work is and what your work is not. It is to make sense out of your own life, to look back on your life and to understand it, to understand the impact of your parents, your family of origin, the traumas that you experienced, the strengths, and also the positive contributions to your life, and where you stand. And as I talk about often, sometimes the way to get to understand our context is when we get out of it. And that can happen in therapy and in a place where somebody else can respond to you differently than you experience as a child or in other situations. Daniel Siegel said in his book, Parenting from the Inside Out, research in the field of child development has demonstrated that a child's security of attachment to parents is very strongly connected to the parents' understanding of their own early life experiences. And then that's its own webinar, of course. But that's how powerful this is in our lives. The more we can make sense out of our own lives, right? The more that we can sort it out, the more that we can look back on it with fresh eyes, with a new perspective, often with the help of somebody else. Even comparing our norm, what we took for granted, with other people's versions of it, that can help us to understand ourselves better. And then we can become much more intentional in the way that we parent our children instead of unconsciously parenting them. I love this quote from the Systematic Training in Effective Parenting. The greatest challenge in parenting is to focus on changing yourself and not your child. That core idea that I go back to over and over again, that is our instinct. I can give webinars on this work all the time, and oftentimes I still can fall back into this pattern myself. I still hear parents after an hour-long webinar going back to, yeah, but how do I change my child? How do I fix my child? And people think when they hear me say focus on changing yourself, they hear me abandoning the child in some ways, like that the child doesn't need help. The child doesn't need support or an intervention. And that's not true. We have the same end goal, but the way to get there is to constantly refocus on yourself. What is it? It is to make your life, I say this all the time, to make your life your project, not your child's life. So if your child is always the project, right? They're always the identified patient. That's going to create a dynamic where they feel sick, where there's shame there, and where you don't end up looking at yourself. But because we want to be good, we need to be good, we see the difficulty in the child, not in our ability to deal with or cope with or respond to the child. Even we have, Daniel Siegel goes on to say, even if we have come to understand ourselves well, our children will still make their own journey through life. Although we may supply them with a secure foundation through our own deeper self-understanding, our role as parents, this is the key, our role as parents serves to support our children's development, not guarantee its outcomes. One of the take-homes from tonight is going to be learning how to let go of outcomes. Right? How can we stay committed, be vigilant, be active, be assertive, be heroic, and not pay attention to outcomes at the same time. So I'll talk about that tonight too. Oftentimes when, and you know, I suspect that the people that show up on these webinars aren't necessarily the ones that might need these webinars the most, ironically. So I think sometimes when I talk about this, I might be preaching to the choir. But I think it's always a good reminder, and even for myself, it's a good reminder. There's oftentimes resistance, the resistance that a parent has. And the thing that I've noticed, and it talks about it in the book, Addictive Thinking, that's why I saw this so vividly, the resistance of parents to do their own work mirrors the resistance of their children. It's the same kinds of excuses. It comes from a place of blame and shame and an inability to embrace complexities, dialectics, like I'm doing the best that I can and I can do better. That I can hold two things, that I can work on two things at the same time. The letters that I see from the field, from clients and students, so much mirror the response that I get from parents when I ask them to go to Al-Anon meetings or therapeutic programming. In fact, just this morning, I got a phone call from one of our parent coordinators, and they wanted to switch some of the language. They wanted to take out the reoccurring assignment to go to Al-Anon or 12-step meetings. Because they get so many calls consistently from parents saying, why do I need to go? I don't have an addiction. And so at first I thought maybe it's just a misunderstanding about what a 12-step meeting is, that it's not a meeting for addicts, but it's a meeting that helps us work on problematic behavior, including codependency. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the meeting is for. But I found it so profound that even it comes to our parent coordinators where the families are calling saying, we don't understand, this doesn't make sense. And I've heard parents say, I don't fit in there. These messages, these meetings are not for me. I don't have anything in common with those people. The others have more serious problems. I don't have a problem. These are the same exact things that 8 out of 10 clients and students say in the field to us the first couple of weeks. And of course, toward the end of the program, just like with the parents who really start to embrace their journey and their work, the clients and students say, you know what, everybody should do this. Everybody should be required to do something like this, even if they don't have problems. And I can see my similarities between everybody in this group. Some are more severe than me, some are less severe, but I can see the similarities. Because mental health, one piece of evidence of mental health is that we see similarities between ourselves and others, not differences. I hear parents talk about differences in my child is younger. What if I have a 21-year-old child, a 25-year-old child? I have a 15-year-old child. I have a 12-year-old child. And of course there are differences. But the core principles in healthy parenting in our work are the same. That's why I have the luxury right now to say that I have an 8-year-old child and I have a 22-year-old child. And of course there's very different tasks involved and responses involved between me and each of those children. But the core principles, 98% of it is the same. My boundaries, my awareness, my intention, my reactivity, my patience, my limitations, owning my stuff, not shaming, not guilting, all of those things that I could go on and on are the same principles involved. So I wanted to have you hear that and understand that. And even, I'll go back to that, even for myself, I can remember, and it's in my book, when I first was encouraged by some friends, I told them I was considering going to a personal workshop for myself, I heard myself making some of the same excuses that I've heard clients make, like I don't have time, I'm too busy, I can't do it, I can do it without it. And I didn't even have confidence in my excuses as I was giving them. I felt ridiculous giving them because they were the same kinds of responses that I hear from clients at every level. So I knew the resistance. And after just a couple of moments, I was convinced and signed up for it. A more spiritual way to talk about resistance from the journey of the heroic parent. There are 3 major chapters in the heroic journey, Campbell's heroic journey: separation, initiation, and return. First, in order to enter the stage of separation, the hero must heed the call to adventure. He must leave what he knows and travel into the darkness of the unknown to undergo his own personal quest. This journey provides him with lessons he needs in his life. Raising children struggling with mental health issues, addictions, or even the normal angst of growing up can be scary and confusing for a parent. We are asked to look into the dark places within ourselves and confront and make peace with our fears. We are asked to let go of what has made us feel safe and secure and embrace some things that may cause us pain. A profound aspect of this journey is that the call to adventure is often initially refused. This refusal applies to both the child and or the parent as they experience a parallel process. And the most common way that I hear it from parents is, in the early phases, is, why do I need to do so much work? I'm not the one with the problem. It's not my problem. That's what it sounds like. But we're not asking you to work on your child's problem. In fact, we're asking you to do just the opposite. We're asking you to transform yourself in this process. That's really what the child's behavior is for families. It's a call. It's an invitation to do things differently. I was just talking to a young adult client, former client of ours this evening, and she was talking about how fantastically challenging and spiritually powerful in a positive way it was for her to do her 4th and her 5th step. And she made some comment about, because I had to. And I thought, I said to her, I said, just imagine if your entire family did the steps, worked the steps, did a 4th and a 5th step. That's making a moral inventory of yourself. And then sharing it with at least one other person, a fearless, rigorous moral inventory. I said, just think what that would be like if everybody in your family was doing that. And they don't qualify for it in the same way that you do because they don't have an active chemical addiction, but it would be a benefit to all of us, and we could all do well by it, and would transform all of us. So what is your work? I'm going to talk about general, and then I'll go into some specific examples. Taking care of yourself and feeling good about yourself. That's your job, right? That's your project. Fighting guilt, right? Learning to get rid of the guilt. In fact, learning to feel guilt and do the right thing. Because a lot of times when you make these shifts, there's going to be many things that you're going to feel guilty that are not going to be instinctual for you. And learning to tolerate that guilt when you do the right thing. Letting go of outcomes, right? Parenting from a place of, I was talking to some clients the other week, and the comment I made was, they were talking about feedback from their children, right? They had written letters to their children, and their children responded very poorly, very upset. And so I was talking about this. I said, if you knew, if you were grounded, if you knew, I'll just imagine an ideal, that what you said was grounded, assertive, honest, kind, your intention was, if you knew all of that perfectly, then when they gave you the feedback, you would hear them. You wouldn't hear it as feedback about you necessarily. In fact, and ironically, your response would be, I'm so sorry it's upsetting to you. Thanks for talking to me. Right? That's what it sounds like when we're grounded and somebody tells us that we hurt them. We say, I'm so sorry. I didn't intend to, but I'm so glad you're telling me. I appreciate it. That's what it sounds like. So learning to let go of outcomes, and so we learn to tell the truth and not worry about whether we're trusted. We learn to express love and not worry about whether or not be obsessed about whether the other person feels loved. We learn to stop trying to control behavior and learn to get clear about boundaries and consequences and limits and communication. So we manage this, not that. We take responsibility for our feelings. We stop using phrases like made me feel, made me think. And we start saying things like, I felt this way. This is what I need. This is what I need to feel okay in my life. And this is how I felt in that situation. We change it from you messages and made me messages to I feel when messages. It's your responsibility to manage your esteem. Get your own validation, not from them. The last place, ideally, psychologically, this is so important. The last place that we need to be looking for validation is in our children, right? That puts the burden on them. That puts the responsibility about how we feel about ourselves on them, and they're not responsible with it. They don't do well with it, besides the fact that it's overwhelmingly smothering. So it's our job to find that with peers, find that with mentors, find that with therapists, find that with sponsors, find that with other people who have some wisdom in the areas that we're talking about with mental health and addiction. And it's your job to make for your serenity. I am a father of 4, as you all probably know, and of course I am sensitive to my children's pain. It is one of the things that makes me a father. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my overall serenity. I'm responsible for taking care of myself, not them. They're not responsible for my happiness or my serenity. That's my job. And you're going to have, I want to say this about limitations. We're all going to have limitations. In fact, if parents didn't have limitations, then children wouldn't learn frustration tolerance or delay of gratification. They wouldn't learn how to adjust to an other. But what we need to do with those limitations is own them. I've said this before, but this is one of these wonderful, beautiful, poetic shifts that my wife has made in the past few years with our youngest. My wife takes timeouts instead of giving timeouts to my daughter. And it actually had the exact same effects of extinguishing negative behavior. But my wife will say, I need to take a timeout. I'm getting upset. I'm getting frustrated. And I need some space. And then my daughter will come to me and say, Dad, Mom's taking a timeout. I don't know what to do. And she'll just have to sit with it and deal with it. But when we say to our children, this is my limitation. This is as far as I can go. This is what I'm comfortable with. Right? Not this is what you need to do. This is this is the thing that you need to do. You need to learn this lesson. If we can talk about this is what I need, this is what I feel comfortable with in our house, we change it from them being wrong and bad and us owning our own limitations. Improving our awareness is our responsibility. Learning about boundaries, learning where we stop and other people start, and learning about communication. Developing flexibility. That's somewhat related to being intentional. Learning to be assertive, honest, to be more courageous in our communication. Right? Assertive people let go of the outcome, because assertive people tell the truth regardless of how it might be received, and ideally from a kind, loving, insightful place. And then learning to be authoritative, not autocratic, but authoritative in the sense that we can make our best decision, we can stand by it, and that we can be wrong when we do it, but we're still going to make the decision. Meaning, what I mean by that is, it's the best that I can do. Well, Dad, you're doing it all wrong. I might be, but we're going to do it this way. This is going to be my line. We're not going to have candy for breakfast, right? But Dad, I know I could be an idiot, but this is the way we're going to do it. Understanding, like I said before, your family of origin and its impact on your lives and subsequently the lives of your children. I've said that before. Challenging how you were parenting, right? Like I said, getting outside of your context and looking back. It wasn't perfect. There were a lot of strengths that your parents had, and there were a lot of weaknesses. And if we don't get clear about those without blame or resentment or fear that we're betraying them or fear that we're ungrateful, if this discussion about challenging parenting causes you to worry about, well, I don't love them, or I'm not grateful, or I'm whining, or I'm being a victim, all of those kinds of thoughts, if that's what that last bullet point triggers in you, there's a good chance that those were messages that were sent to you by your parents when you were upset. And again, they wanted to make it about teaching you the right thing, but really it was about their limitations. Because an adult parent, when a child is upset, says to their feelings, thank you for telling me, I'm glad you're talking about it, I'm so sorry I hurt you. And then they maintain their boundaries. That's what happens. Self-care. Self-care is a core piece of this. Learning to take care of yourself, learning to develop. I love it when parents become too busy. In the case where the pendulum has swung to the place where they are always exaggeratingly there for their children. When they become too busy at times to respond to a situation that can wait. Right? You're never not going to respond to a crisis. Right? Your child's safety is going to take priority. But it's okay for you to have a hobby, to have things to do. And in the long run, it helps your child to know that they don't have to take care of you, that you can take care of yourself. Regular exercise, play a sport at your local rec center, golf, physical. I mean, there's no end to that list, right? Do something physically active to spend that energy, to relieve stress. Special hobbies, book clubs, Toastmasters, sporting events, knitting, church activities, games. I know years ago there used to be bridge clubs, playing poker with your friends, political, social, environmental activism. All of these things fill up your life. I know in some ways it sounds like I'm saying two different things, because I'm saying we need to be child-centered in a lot of ways, and we also need to take care of ourselves. And so the question really gets answered when I'll be there for you. You are my priority, and if I am doing it at the cost of my own self-care, my own health, physical, emotional, spiritual, then that's going to be a problem. We're going to have to find some way to do that, because I need to do this stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to be asking for you to compensate and take care of me in those areas. Developing hobbies, reading, musical instruments, collecting something, language, learning a new language, going back to school, working with animals, old new hobby. The idea is that you get responsible for feeding yourself, for filling up that bucket. And in those moments when you can't be there for your children in a compassionate, patient way, finding a way to remove yourself in that moment or later to say, I need to fill myself up because I'm about to react in an inflexible, angry, right, disrespectful, non-assertive, passive-aggressive way. So I need to figure out how to fill. My life is out of bounds. When I find myself being short, sarcastic with my family, I know that something's out of balance. I'm working too hard. I'm burning the candle at both ends. Something is going on in my life where I need to reevaluate me. Support groups. This was the thing that was talked about by the parent coordinator this morning. Who are they for? These support groups are for somebody who's in a relationship with another human being, with other human beings. More specifically, in a relationship with human beings who are practicing self-destructive or self-defeating behaviors. Don't get hung up on alcohol versus cocaine versus cutting versus defiance versus school refusal, gaming addiction, depression, severe anxiety, eating disorder. Don't get confused by that content. That's just the scenery. The drama, the plot is how do you relate to them and their issues and their problems, right? They are your qualifier. They'll talk about that in some of these meetings. They're your qualifier. For me, my qualifier is the clients that I work with, every one of my family members. I don't really need one qualifier because I watch how I get in relationship with my daughters biting her fingernails. Not nearly as destructive and self-defeating as some of as all the stuff that you sent your children to evoke for, but how do I relate to that? How do I deal with that? It's the same psychology dealing with something small as it is dealing with something as severe as a severe chemical addiction. And when we get it, we hear it. Right? When we get it, we don't hear the specifics. We hear the general themes. So when you go to these meetings, it's about learning how to be in relationship with people that are doing stupid things, drunk things, drugging things, self-destructive, self-defeating things, unhealthy things. We ask you, and this comes from this culture, we ask you to try 6 meetings while your child is with us. It provides community. It's free, right? There aren't a lot of things in this field with all these interventions that are free, so it's free. It provides community, sharing, and support. Not from professionals, and it's not about giving advice. It's about people sharing their experience, strength, and hope and saying, this is what has worked for me. I just saw an interview with David Bowie. We all know David Bowie passed in the last little bit. And I saw an interview from him, looked like it was done in the 70s. And he was talking about his own addiction. And he was explaining to the interviewer that he can't even have, the interviewer says, can't you just have one drink? And he said, no, I can't have one drink. It'll be the death of me. He said, I've learned, for me, that doesn't work. And what I've learned for me is that if I do one, I'm gone. I can't stop. And he kept on saying, for me. And that's how they talk in these meetings, right? It is a great model for all of us in talking in all of our relationships. It's not me telling you what the truth is about life, but me saying, this is what I found to work. This is my experience. This is what I know. I tried it that way. I can't do it that way. I can't drink one drink. I can't manage your drug addiction. I can't live in a house where there's cocaine, right? I can't live in this certain dynamic, this certain situation. That's what I do. So this is how I take care of myself. You know, formal work includes individual and family therapy. And we can talk about what you need, but just go in there and bring the letters. Just go in there and talk about your child. Just start off talking about your child. Right? That's the complaint. The complaint is, my son is doing X, Y, or Z. He's not going to school. He's depressed. He's using drugs. He's defiant. She's cutting. She's anxious. Whatever it is. Just go in there, start complaining and say, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to be helpful. That's the question, right? How can I be helpful? And then your work begins. I already mentioned the 12 steps. You know, these groups are all 12-step groups. Right? Al-Anon, Codependency Anonymous. Al-Anon was started originally by the spouses of alcoholics. Coda is more general about every kind of thing, but I find those two very, I find them to be very parallel. Some Al-Anon means I like better than Coda. I generally fit more in the Coda group, but Al-Anon I think can be wonderful. Families Anonymous are for family members. Nar-Anon for family members of drug addicts, and then for young people they have Alateen. And you can go to any of those websites and you can find meetings in your area. And if you live anywhere near a decent-sized city, there are going to be several meetings every day. And then when you go there and you meet somebody, ask them what meetings they like. That's a really good tool. Are there any other meetings that you go to that you like? Ask them. I already mentioned 12-step. Maybe going to NA or AANA or Overeaters Anonymous. It stands for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex Anonymous, and there's a lot more. Right? I didn't list all the anonymouses, but maybe there's something in your area that needs, not because of your child, but that needs addressing or balance, and you get to decide that. Attending parent support groups when they come in or near your area. Going to parent workshops. We would like all parents to go to the Entrada workshop while their child is with us. Going into doing individual therapy, like I said. And then doing your work on your parent portal work. That's reading the assignments, writing the assignments, right? Following the directives that come up there, having those discussions with your child's therapist. Because when we're doing those phone calls, a good portion is about giving you an update, but it's about also integrating you into the work. Learn how to create your own support network. You get to decide who you share this with. Like I've shared many times, I shared our struggles with my oldest pretty openly because I wanted everybody to know that that's what was going on in our family. And people say, well, then you'll worry about the stigma. I don't see it as a stigma. It is what it is. People can judge if they want to. I can't control that. But what I can do is show up authentically, and it didn't affect us in a negative way. Confronting the prejudice in your family. I have so many times where people reach out to me and ask, what if my mother, my father, my sister, my brother doesn't support it? At some point, you get to say, I'm done with this conversation. You get to say, mind your own business. You get to say, I don't want to hear it anymore. And a suggestion that I have is you share the webinar that we made for friends and family with them. You can go into the parent portal, do the friends and family webinar. It does never have a password. You can share it with anybody to introduce that. But see if they want to learn. Because you don't need advice from them. You don't need them telling you, gosh, if you just love her, if you just support her, she's great at my house. You don't need that. You need people that are there to understand you. And you get to set the boundary around that. And it's okay to shut them down. And it's okay to walk away. And it's okay to hang up. And of course, ideally, you set a boundary verbally. And if they can request it, great. And if they can't, you get to take care of you. See, people don't take care of us until we take care of ourselves. It just doesn't work that way. And we want them. We're waiting for them. We're hoping that they'll take care of us. We depend. Then we feel resentful that they're not doing things for us. We have to do it for ourselves, even at the risk of people being upset with us, being mad and judgmental about us, towards us. We have to do that stuff first. That's the work. That's why it's work. Right? We have to stand up to people thinking, gosh, she's being an idiot. He's being an idiot. He's being selfish and self-absorbed. Whatever their judgments are, ignorant, whatever they are. And then we say, I'm willing to stand up to those judgments, and I'm not gonna expose myself to them if I can avoid it. Work to connect with local families by going to your support groups, the 12-step groups, and provide support for each other during difficult times. I want to say one more thing about the meetings, because some of you, obviously, we can't go around to the entire country and have meetings in all of your areas. It's not possible. If you go, we really do try in some ways to mirror the meetings after the principles. We don't do the same format, but after the principles of Codependence Anonymous and Al-Anon. That's what this whole webinar actually is about. In fact, I'm going to have several quotes coming up right here. Go and help other people that are a little bit farther behind you. Be a mentor. Be a sponsor when it's time. Share, be a parent reference. Not because we need parent references, although they help us, but because it helps you to teach, to tell your story, to talk about what helped you, what worked for you. And don't give advice. You don't have to give advice. You just say, this is what works for me. This is what I've found to work for me. When I've struggled with that, I've tried this, and for me, it worked. Share some wisdom, and then, of course, learn to glean it from others. Get on your journey. Get off your child's journey and get on your journey. And your journey is being a parent, being an adult parent. Understand this is from Al-Anon and Coda, the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. Right? If we hold on to those 3 ideas, then we can learn to speak from a place of authenticity and truth instead of a place of control or thinking about the other or outcomes. Understand the difference between influence and control. We have a webinar on that. There's also a chapter in the book on influence versus control about the idea about understanding my impact, being sensitive to it, being aware of it, being intentional, but not trying to control the outcome of the behavior of the other person. Right? And there's that fine, I think almost spiritual line that we get to when we do that. Of course, the definition of insanity is doing the right thing, the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different outcome. Try something different. You ask your children to do some incredibly scary and difficult things, right? to walk into a group of strangers. After about a week, they read an impact letter from mom and dad or parents about all the things that have led up to their admission to a vote, their enrollment at a vote. And one thing we can create empathy with them, we can find empathy for them, is by walking into a meeting that scares us, that's uncomfortable, that's outside of our comfort zone. And even share that with them. I didn't want to go. I was afraid. And then don't give them a lecture about how great it was. You don't need to say that, but just say, I know what it feels like to be scared to walk into a place that's uncomfortable. It's not even half of what you're being asked to do. Not even a third, not even a hundredth of what you're being asked to do. And it's hard. And I'm supposed to be the adult one, the whole healthy one. I don't even have the problems and the insecurities that you have. And it was difficult for me to walk into a meeting. So you're not saying that part of it. That's just for your own mind. So I can only imagine what it's like for the child if I'm the mature, grown-up one. And then know what your side of the street is. There's a saying in Al-Anon and Coda that says, stay on your side of the street, right? You have some work to do, right? And your work and their work are not the same thing. I think I skipped a slide. There was a quote on here that I didn't read. I lost it. Sorry, folks. It was from my book where I borrow from the book The Anatomy of Peace, where the mother and father, after a day at a workshop, after dropping off their children at a Willer's program, dropping off their child at a Willer's program, the main characters, go to the hotel that night, and the wife is feeling badly about things, and the husband says, you didn't put any drugs in Chris's mouth, and the wife kind of corrects him and says, look, you don't understand. I don't feel bad about what he did. I feel bad about what I did. That's what knowing your side of the street means. Alrighty, any live questions? How do we know if we're doing more work than our child? Doesn't matter. It'll be unfortunate for him, and you'll do well by it. Now, we talk about the, for example, if your child doesn't write you, I might say don't write back. I might encourage you not to write back because it's a conversation. But I think sometimes I think when we get challenged about this, about doing more work than our children, I think it is because we're thinking that if we do enough work, I'm going to read all this stuff. I have parents that do a ton of work, but the energy, the place that it comes from, the psychology of it is, I can fix you. Right? When a parent is doing their work for them, that's a different energy. Does that make sense? That's I think what we often sense or mean when we talk about doing more work than the other. Sometimes it's compensating for. Sometimes and it comes out. I was just coaching a parent today. Their child hadn't written them since they have written them, and I said, you can wait. It's okay. It's okay to wait a week. It's a conversation. And of course, they wanted to write them back to let them know that they were loving them, they were thinking about them. And the child was taking in this case, some healthy space. And it said as much. I need to sort through my feelings before I respond to the letter. So, doing more work in that context does matter. And if it's for them to change, if you're overcompensating, and it comes across with that expectation, that's what we mean by more work. But if you're just working harder than your child in general, that's just what it is. I kept going to Al-Anon because I learned that addiction is a family disease disorder. This is the only disease that can kill the person not using, codependency. I have told others I suffer from the isms. I don't use, but I still suffer from the family disease of addiction. Thank you. You know what shocks me sometimes is when alcoholics and drug addicts don't know how codependent they are. Right? They think it's a weakness. They think those are the weak ones. Us alcoholics and addicts, we're the strong ones. We're the tough ones. But the core of it all is codependency. So, codependency is in essence the thesis. It's the antithesis of my book. My book is about changing the question from what do I do to who am I? What's my relationship to my child? What's my relationship to their problems? That's the answer. The opposite is codependency. The opposite is what do I do? How do I change you? How do I fix you? How do I control what you feel? How do I not make you sad? How do I make you feel okay? How do I take away your pain and your problems and your issues? All right. I have some new announcements tonight, so stick with me. We have the Entrada Parent Workshop, which is coming up. I think that's just this weekend, isn't it? We would like all families, if they can, possibly to go to this. That's the workshop I talked about. There's a special parenting workshop I'm doing on February 6th in Phoenix. There's the information there. If you have any questions, email Carol@familyinvolvementcenter.org. It's filling up. There's a small fee for it. I think it's $15 or something, but I'll be doing that in Phoenix. We have the upcoming intensive on February 18th to 21st. That's for any adult, including parents. So it's the same program as Heroic Parenting. It's just that young adults can also attend it also. So if you're waiting for a Heroic Parent, you don't need to, because it's the same program as Finding You. And then the Heroic Journeys Workshop coming up in May. In fact, that one might be full. I should check out, Michael. I think it's full already. That's for families. There are the different contact information there. Here's some upcoming meetings. Los Angeles, the Bay Area, New York City, Houston, Chicago. Those are set. So make your plans if you're near there. Look forward to seeing you. Contact Stephanie at evoketherapy.com to RSVP or for more information. Please RSVP, and please, if you RSVP, show up. Pursuits is for our high adventure program, 7 to 14-day trips. They can be specialized, or excuse me, they can be created privately for your family. So they can be for families or young adults. I've already spent enough time on these tonight, but this is on every webinar. Follow us on social media. That's another thing. I want to say this. Make sure if you want information that we have your current up-to-date information to email you for announcements. So after you leave Evoke, if you still want to hear about parent workshops, parent meetings in your area, other activities, find out about the blog, make sure you're either logged on to our social media here, you're signed up to our social media, or that you keep your email current with us. Paperback just came out now. Paperback just came out yesterday, so it's on Amazon.com. That's my book. Also, it's available on Audible or for CD for purchase. All right, any last questions before I close up? What happens when a parent does not admit their own addiction? It affects the entire family, and that parent serves alcohol to underage children too in that parent's home. We're divorced. This bothers me. You know, I just actually wrote a blog this week that I'd refer you to just this week on co-parenting when the other person doesn't support healthy boundaries. So without going too far into that, check that out. It's just on Evoke. Just got posted 2 or 3 days ago, so go to the blog page. You're gonna have one hand tied behind your back, and it's gonna be difficult. You're at a disadvantage. What you need to do is still stay on your side of the street. Now, this problem, and this is illegal, right? So there are more legal things that you can do. There's things you can do. Talk to a lawyer. Talk to a family lawyer. I say that in the blog. Talk about reporting him or her to Child Protective Services, because that's possible. This could be considered child endangerment. It's okay to do that at this level. You get to decide. Talk to people who know about these things. Make sure that you're informed. Make sure that what your rights are. But when they are less subtle than this, what I don't want you to do is become obsessed. Become so focused and obsessed and concentrate so much on what they are doing or not doing that you lose track of your work, right? You lose track of the thing that you can control, And if you focus so much on the things that you can control, then you're going to increase that disadvantage. You also can end up polarizing, right? Compensating for them. And when you compensate for them pretty significantly, you stop being authentic, right? You might get more rigid in this case, and you might be the bad cop. But then you lose your own balance, and you lose opportunities to nurture, right? You become inauthentic and half of a person. So those are some of the things that you can do. But check out the blog where I talk about it. All right, folks, thanks for joining me tonight. Our next webinar is about moral development. It's tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And I look forward to doing that, and hope these are helpful to you, helpful points of contact. Have a great evening, and talk to you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.